Alright guys, this is once again Chroma playing at 25 NL 4 table session, and let's see what develops. So right here, right off the bat, we have someone posting under the gun. I'm gonna mark him as a weak player, because a good player would first of all not post at all, but certainly not under the gun. So this guy's isolating. I've seen him in my previous video and he seems fairly loose aggressive. So I'm actually gonna right off the bat go ahead and 3-bet him, and I misclick right there. But he still folds, that's awesome. I wanted to make it slightly bigger just to make it harder for him to call. Because 3x when you're out of position is a bit small. Like, he's getting pretty good odds as well as being in position, and you kind of want to discourage him from calling a little bit more. Since there is this really weak player, I'm gonna open slightly larger if he's still in the pot. I'm also gonna probably open a slightly tighter range to compensate. This is not a good flop for either of us, and I still probably have the best hand. That turn card is interesting. It's a really good bluff card, but I don't really have to bluff. Him donking out on this card is very peculiar, because this is a much better card for my range than it is for him. So for him to donk out, that's kind of weird. Kind of suggests that he's probably not a very good player either. His stack also suggests the same thing. Here I'm actually going to call with my 10-9 since he made a fairly small open, and I get a discount from the big blind. The hand actually does play reasonably well post flop. I'm going to check again and call his bet. Here I'm going to fold, because he actually makes a bet into a range that's much stronger. Usually that should be pretty strong. I'm not sure if that's the case for him, because he's probably a weaker player, but I'm still going to make the fold. He'll auto-exploit himself by betting into my stronger range at some point. Here I'm going to make a really small value bet. Hope to get called by like pocket 8s or ace high or something like that. Any pocket pair lower than 9s basically. That's not 5s or deuces. Because he checks twice. At that point I'm pretty sure my 9 is best. But if we make a bigger bet, we're almost never ever gonna get called. Okay, so my usual is 2.5x, but since this guy is behind me, I'm gonna make it 3x instead. And this certainly fits my tighter range, because this is just a pretty good hand. I really don't mind if he calls behind me with this hand. The only thing I don't want to happen is that he 3-bets me. That flop is fine for c-betting because I have 2 overs, a backdoor straight and a backdoor flush draw, and it doesn't hit anyone at all. He calls, and I mean, he's a weaker player, so that's just what he does. I pair up on the turn, and now I'm basically just gonna go for it. He could have an 8, but he's just as likely not to have an 8. He's actually more likely not to have an 8, of course. Question is, what does he have? But he could have anything at this point, like we don't know enough of him. Here I'm gonna check back and try to realize my equity. So this guy 3-bets me and gets a cold call. It's really tempting to 4-bet, but I don't think my hand is strong enough to go and call a shove. As weird as that might sound, because I know that people are really stacking off very tightly against under the gun, so I'm just gonna call and keep the pot a little bit smaller. Here, after he checks again, I'm gonna take a stab, because it's gonna work a lot and I still have a gut shot. My 7 and my 5 are looking okay right now as well, if I hit them. But this is gonna happen very often. I explained this in an earlier video too. When someone checks to you twice after you miss a c-bet, chances are they're gonna fold a lot of the time. So I'm clearly not gonna give up. I don't see a point in raising and making his range stronger than it has to be. So his range is already fairly strong, but I should still be ahead of his range. However, if I raise, then his range becomes so strong that I'm not sure if I can beat much anymore. Because he's clearly gonna fold the weaker parts of his range. So he checks, and now I'm fairly certain that I have the best hand. I do want to protect it, but I also want to get some value, so I'm gonna bet very small. If he happens to raise, I'm gonna have to stack off because I do kind of invite him to raise me. And my hand is still strong. If he barrels down, I would call him down anyways. So if he happens to play fancy and check raise all in here, I'm gonna say, well played dude, you would have got my stack anyways. Yeah, I'm not sure if you heard that, but there's fireworks outside. Kinda bummed about folding out, but I still think it's the right decision. So these videos have actually been good for my play as well, because I have to explain everything I do, and when I do that, I tend to things become more clear for myself, first of all, but I also have to justify everything I do, so I can't really make any irrational, spewy bluffs, since I can't really rationalize those. Like, I can't explain why I'm doing that, so that basically making a video basically stops me from doing that too, so that's actually pretty cool. So I might actually start making videos on my own stakes just for myself. Also helps me figure out their ranges better, because I actually have to visualize their range, put it into words, and follow it up with a logical conclusion. But that's not the hard part. The conclusion is usually the easy thing. If you figure out what they're doing, then adjusting to that is pretty much the easy part. Not gonna defend 9-4 suited, even though this guy raised twice in a row under the gun. Remember, he's the same guy when I defended the 10-9 offsuit. Usually I'd probably be opening 4-3 suited, but not with this guy behind me. As I mentioned, he likes to play hands, and I don't want to play out of position with the hand this week. Yeah, it looks very nice, but it just flops really bad pairs, and then you're just basically relying on making a straight or a flush. Whereas a hand like that benefits a lot from fold equity, which you just don't have enough against a guy like this. Hands like these are much stronger against players like this. Even a hand like King 10 offsuit or Queen Jack offsuit, those all gain in value against someone who doesn't want to fold, because, well, if you make a pair, you can actually get value from them, which is a lot harder against a better player. Like, they're definitely not gonna call you down 3 streets if you have Queen Jack and flop 1 pair. Or they may call you down, but you're not gonna win. Oops, almost forgot to make the bigger raise again. So this guy also seems like a pretty weak player so far. He's played 4 out of 5 hands, and he only called 3 of them, and this is the 5th out of 6 hands that he played. So it's very likely this guy is not the best. Also, everyone else seems to be reasonably reggish, at least in their statistics, and a lot of these regulars will leave the table once there's no weaker player, so that basically has to be him. It's not a guarantee, maybe he's just unknown to everybody, but it's likely that he's not a very good player. Here we have a standard 3-bet with pocket 9s, blind versus blind. If he re-raises, I would usually shove on my own stakes, but here I'm not gonna do that, because I think these players will not 4-bet as light as my usual opponents would. And against a much tighter 4-bet range, 9s don't do as well as they would against a looser one, because I have less fold equity for one. So here I'm actually gonna take a chance and re-raise him, because he seems to be folding a lot to 3-bets, as well as being fairly wide in opening. So this is one of the hands I like doing that with. I'm not usually doing this. Like, this standard play for me here would be a fold. We actually get 4-bet, cold 4-bet, and this guy opened 3 out of 3 times under the gun now, so I'm definitely defending this. Flop a double gutter, and here the question is, can we actually call? This one I'm gonna check raise, by the way. calling is also an option, but I like being aggressive most of the time. But I'm probably folding here because we're just hoping to flop 2 pair or straight or a flush, and that's just not gonna happen often enough. And he makes the fold, so that's good. Notice also that he raised this position 3 out of 3 times, which means his range is probably weaker than usual, which also means my check raise has more fold equity. So this guy has started folding a little bit more, so maybe we can start going back to normal opening sizes. I hope he tries to get back at me here, because I've been playing back at him a couple times. And he actually does go and play back at me. And clearly I want that. I'm gonna 4-bet and get it in here. That may seem standard, but if he folds a lot to 3-bets, he might also fold a lot to 4-bets. That being said, I'm still gonna do it. If he has aces, then good for him. Not much we can do. If he ships after thinking this long, that's gonna be an issue. Because it may look weaker, but usually it's actually stronger. But he actually folds. Someone who thinks a long time and then raises is usually pretty strong. I'm just marking a couple players. From these last few videos I've started picking up some statistics about people. So this guy seems a little bit leggish. And I'm basing these on at least 100 hands. Except for the green ones. You can, like this would immediately give him a green recreational / weak player tag. For obvious reasons, because better players just don't limp. Or well, I should say they don't open limp. Like if there's 4 limpers, you can certainly limp along. Even if there's just 1 limper, it's sometimes okay. With 2 it becomes a lot better. Yeah, same thing for this guy. Now I'm sure he's a weak player. I was already pretty sure, but now I'm sure. Yeah, I don't really know much about him, so I'm gonna give him the benefit of the doubt. So now his stack has become so small that I don't really want to make it bigger anymore. I don't need to at all. I don't need to risk more money. So this guy is getting active, but I cannot call here, and I certainly cannot 4-bet. This is a really nitty player, so if he knows that, then he should probably also be 3-betting pretty tight. And now I hate my life, of course, because I would have flopped the nuts and made a bunch of money, probably. Because again, this guy's range should be pretty strong. Really bad flop for him though, so I'm curious if he's betting aces or kings. Like, I would check them. Because the calling range just includes a lot of 7s, 9s, 8s and such things, and Jack 10 suited, and all kinds of things that connect really well with that board. 9-8 suited, 8-7 suited. So he's isolating again, I think. I mean, I haven't seen him isolate yet, but I've seen him raise a lot. And we have this dynamic where I've been 3-betting him quite often, so I'm just gonna do it again and hope he spazzes. Which is getting more and more likely. The more I 3-bet him, the more likely he's gonna get to be spazzing. Same for the 4-bet last time. At least he doesn't fold this time, but I'd rather he just spazzed. So the issue here is, since I think he's more likely to start spazzing, he's also far less likely to fold here. And that's an issue. So I'm actually gonna check and call, which seems fine on this board. I don't have a lot of ways to improve my hand anyways. So this guy 3-bets me. I know him from earlier days when I was playing 50 or maybe 100, and he 3-bets a lot, especially against me, so I'm clearly just gonna 4-bet and get it in. Here I'm calling, probably calling turn 2 depending on how much he bets. Here I'm betting 1/3 of the pot. That seems like a nice value bet size. I'm only worried about jacks. I don't think he has king jack. Maybe if it's suited he could have it. Calling again. Now I actually have to fold. I didn't play this hand well. I should have folded turn given his stack size. That's just dumb. I got a little bit too deep into our dynamic, and that should not have happened. Okay, so this guy called me. I flop an overpair. I'm gonna bet big. 1, because he's gonna call with a lot of hands, and 2, I really want to protect my hand because it's very vulnerable. And this guy's gonna call with all sorts of stuff. But yeah, that ace king was really horribly played. Looking back on it, I should have just c-bet. If he wants to spaz out on there, like, let him do it, because I don't just have ace king. I could have pocket tens, aces, kings, and all sorts of things. Like, in his mind I'm probably doing stuff against him, but really I'm just playing my range, and my range is pretty strong in that spot. So he bets out, and this is a really dry board. I kinda have some backdoors, so I'm actually gonna raise this. Because this kind of flop gets overbet in the sense that people are betting too often. Here I'm gonna check and call. And this is one of those spots where I really often pick up the pot. Okay, so now I'm actually just gonna bet large. Yeah, I'm just gonna pot it. The board got even drawier, and actually I didn't think that through either. I mean, the board got wetter. That's an argument for betting big, because there's more hands that can call you. But he didn't bet the flop when he had the chance, so he's probably not that strong. Then again, he could have picked up a draw. So this guy 3-bets me. Remember him from my first 25 NL video. Seemed like he was fairly 3-bet happy, according to his stats also show this. Let me see how often he 3-bet against the button. So 15 possibilities, he did it 5 times, so 1 in 3. So that's something to keep in mind. I'm not gonna do anything this time because my hand is too weak, but I am gonna play back at him at some point a little bit later, because he's probably 3-betting too much. So this is number 6 in 16. That's getting a really high number. So versus my button, he did it 3 out of 5. 60%. Against everyone in total, 6 out of 16, or 38%. Those are some really high numbers. I mean, the sample is small, but once people get to extremes, it becomes... I mean, it doesn't become accurate, but it becomes far more likely that they are closer to that extreme, so that they are, in this case, much more likely to be 3-betting a lot. So I'm gonna be 4-betting him in the near future when I'm on the button and he 3-bets me again. Not faulting this. If he raises, I'm calling, because this hand plays really well in position, so I don't see any point in 3-betting. I would rather 3-bet 10-7 or 10-8, because that plays a lot worse. But it still plays reasonable. I'm not opening here because of this guy who likes to 3-bet me. So we get squeezed and I can probably call because my hand is good enough. Definitely call on this flop. So he checks. That could mean two things. One, he's afraid that I have a set, which I could easily have. Or two, he just doesn't have anything. Either way, I'm gonna check back and try to get the showdown. It's gonna be interesting if he bets. Which he doesn't, so... I mean, you might think we could value bet here, but one, we're not gonna have too many hands that can call us. But two, he could still have jacks of tens. And that kind of sucks. But against the ace king we just take it down, so that's fine. Clearly that's what we wanted basically. And that's gonna happen a fairly large amount of the time when the action is like this. So here it seems like this guy might have some showdown value, so I'm actually gonna bet really big and try to make him fold it, because we could easily be beat. But I think we can basically win it every single time. For like 80 to 90% of the time. If he calls there, I bomb the river again, and then I put an immense pressure on him and he basically has to fold. And this guy does something stupid. I wasn't gonna fold because I had like a very good hand, and it doesn't make sense for him to have a flush there, so I'm not gonna give him credit for one. Usually river raises though are the nuts. So here I'm actually gonna play it tricky, because I don't think there's much that can call me except for the king of clubs. Actually, if he has stuff like that, he's just gonna check it back, so I changed my mind. I'm gonna bet it. Best way to get value probably. So he calls, and that's a horrible card because now all the full houses make, or all the sets make a full house. So I'm gonna bet fairly small and hope to get called by like the king or the queen of clubs. If I get raised, I'm folding. Because he cannot have the ace of clubs, so he's not raising a flush here. It makes absolutely no sense to raise anything else, so he just has to have a full house. Don't call here, you're only gonna see a full house. You could argue for not betting, but I think that's a mistake and a fallacy, because there's still plenty that will call us. Any hand with the king of clubs is gonna call. Queen of clubs might call too. Here I'm gonna bet small because I have a reasonably weak showdown value hand against a weak player that will call all sorts of stuff if you don't bet too much. Even that was too much? Okay. So yeah, about this flush, like there's just absolutely nothing you can beat. The only thing you beat is a bluff. And like what could he possibly be bluffing there? Like what would he call the flop, call the turn with that is actually bluffing? He would basically have to turn a jack into a bluff, and at these stakes almost nobody's capable of doing that. Like never say never, but it's extremely rare. And he's definitely not raising for value with the king or the queen of clubs. If he does, then my hat off to him, but it's a big mistake. He got me this time, but most people won't fold the ace of clubs, so you're just gonna own yourself. Here I'm gonna barrel again. I don't want to get into check calling mode. I did that before, and it always seems to get yourself into trouble with hands like these, so I'm trying to get some value, protect my hand still, and then hope to check it down on the river. Let's hope he has a 4 in jacks. I could also bet really small as sort of like a blocker bet that doubles up for value, but I like checking more. If I have the best hand, he's probably gonna be checking back. Although he could bluff a missed flush draw. So that's actually, he could easily do that, but he doesn't even bet the 10. So like that's awesome. And this is standard on these stakes. Players are not very willing to value bet light, although I wouldn't even consider that all that light. He's gonna make it 5 big blinds here. He's probably calling. There you go, and he's probably folding. Because if he can call 5, then he... I was gonna say he would have raised himself. Like, I don't get why you wouldn't raise yourself and then call a bet that large, but sure. Here I'm just gonna go ahead and value... and bet as a sort of semi-bluff on a really dry board. Here I'm gonna 4-bet, clearly. I'm just gonna make it 5. We are sort of deeper. Let's see how often this guy donks actually. Pretty often. Hope he shoves clearly. I'm gonna barrel because I still have overs. And this guy could be calling with a lot of hands, and it's really weak to just give up right now. So I don't want to do that. Right here, I'm checking back because I have this board completely crushed. And there's not much he can call with. And this guy 3-bets me again, and I have an easy call. I have a gut shot, but he doesn't see that all that much. Here I now have to bet because the board is getting somewhat scarier and I do need to get value. I'm actually folding here, and this one I'm giving up because he's no longer folding any pair once that 4 completes the 3 of a kind there. Like this, weak players just won't fold any full house, and this is also why I bet. Like I can still win. Like I said, this guy's calling all sorts of stuff, although he did actually have something reasonable this time. He had a flush draw. And here I'm gonna be 3-betting because he's on the button, therefore has a wide range, and my hand is pretty decent. I don't even mind if he calls because he's so loose that my range is still, or this king jack is still way ahead of his calling range. That's how loose he is. I do need to 4-bet him at some point, because calling only gets you so far. Like yes, you're defending, but he still has a big advantage if you call. So someone who 3-bets a lot, the best thing you can do is 4-bet him a bit more. Like calling is not that bad. They don't really mind if you call. If you're in position, they kind of like it less, of course. But they hate getting 4-bet far more. Here I'm actually gonna fold if he 3-bets, but I'm expecting him to stop 3-betting me at some point. Like, he must realize that I'm not gonna fold every single time. In fact, I haven't folded yet to him. So here, he donks out on an ace-high board, and I'm actually gonna raise with my semi-bluff. Donk bets are often not that strong. And even if he is calling, I still have outs. This donk bet is a little bit stronger than usual though, because he did bet a little bit bigger. I often see these recreational players betting for minimum, donk betting for the minimum, and you can basically, they're basically inviting you to raise, and they're just gonna fold almost every single time. And he raises again. I have the perfect hand for calling, so even though I want to start 4-betting him, this is not the hand. I will float this flop though. Actually, I'm gonna raise it. Yep. Like, you have to raise these small bets fairly frequently. That's a way to stop them, because they're betting. Usually people, when they bet this small, they're betting a really wide range. So they're gonna end up having to fold a lot if you raise. It's also the best defense you have, because if you call, you're letting them see a cheap turn card. But basically just because their range is really wide, and I wasn't just raising anything there. I actually had some decent backdoor straights, two backdoor straights and a backdoor flush draw. Usually I like it when I get a walk, but not if I have kings, obviously. But what can you do? Let's hope a couple people come along so I can call too. I can't play heads up with this hand. This one I can, and I will. So this guy has squeezed 1 in 3 times so far, but his sample's really small, so that's just probably a coincidence. Here I'm gonna open because of this guy. I don't mind if he calls, and this guy's pretty tight, so he will fold a lot. I don't mind playing heads up in position with 9-5 against a weak player. This is gonna be, once my computer unfreezes, it's gonna be a 3 bet, and this is a value bet. Not sure why it froze. It does that every once in a while, not that often though. Okay, so he checks and calls, so he could easily have a hand like ace king or something like that, so I'm gonna bet pretty small for value, hope he calls. And then I might even put another value bet in on the river, because I'm pretty sure I have the best hand. Especially at these stakes, most players are not balanced enough to check like over pairs on boards like that. Neither do they check sets. This isn't also this isn't really a kind of board where you need to do that. You can actually bet it really wide, so you don't really have much of a weak checking range. Like, that board is so dry and it just doesn't hit anyone that your initial open range is probably strong enough to just bet that flop with a very high frequency in the early positions. Gonna make a 5x again. So I mentioned that limping along can be okay, but I think if there's just one really bad player limping, he should be isolating no matter what he has. So here we go. I'm gonna bet large, just because there's a lot of overcards here, and he probably doesn't fold 2 overs. And I also want to get him out if possible. Just play heads up against him, because I want to get stacks in against this guy if possible. I would prefer if he called me instead of raised me, but if he does, then I'm still gonna get it in. Because I can still beat like 7x, flush draws, and a couple other hands. So this guy calls, and that is worrisome. Because he just limp called 5 big blind, so he does need to have something decent, like suited connector, pocket pair. 7-6 just hit 2 pairs. So I think my strategy here is gonna be to check and call the turn and check and fold the river. Once I check and call the turn, he realizes that I'm not just on air, and that will probably deter him from doing something stupid on the river. And this, like, it may look like a bluff, but if he were bluffing, he could have used the smaller sizing. Like, this just looks to me like, look, I'm doing something stupid, please call me with like ace king and think I'm bluffing or something like that. Because he probably realizes or thinks I'm weak. So I'm definitely not gonna call this. I don't like his bet, by the way, but yeah, I'm not sure if I really have to say that. Like, he's betting 4 times the pot. There's just no need for that. If you see this happen sometimes, make a note and start checking really strong hands on the turn. Like nutty hands, and then you can just snap him off, and he's just losing a lot of money that way. I'm actually just gonna limp. He's gonna check back most of the time. almost always. And like this hand, I prefer keeping it small unless until I hit. I think my hand is best. That's a pretty horrible card. Not because it's a diamond, but just because it's a 10. Just everything connects with that 10 almost. So that's a really, really bad card. I would have preferred a king or a queen over the 10. Like this is probably the worst card in the deck. So he 3-bet me, I called, so we're gonna have some fun. He overbets and I'm done. Okay, so there's two things I can do here. I could check and call, or I could bet out myself. So I think once he 3-bets, if he had a good ace, he probably would have bet. So I don't think he has that, but if he has kings or something like that, he could easily check behind. So I do want to get some value. Because I think I have the best hand, but if I check, it's likely that he's gonna check back. So he calls, and we get a 7 on the river. I'm not too worried about the straight hitting, but I need to bet small to make sure that I can get called. If he raises, I probably call, because it doesn't make sense for him to have a 6. Even though he could have pocket 6s. I'm not sure if he would call the turn with that. Guess he could have a6. Yeah, and it works. Like I'm expecting to see something like queens. Ace 3, so he did have an ace. Okay, that's fine too. I mean, I can understand why he checks back. I don't understand why he 3-bet me with ace 3, but I do understand why he checks back weaker aces, because he cannot get 3 streets anyways. But yeah, it's still my original premise still holds, that I think that I have the best hand there. Like even though he has an ace, my ace is just better almost always, because if he has ace queen or ace king, he's probably just gonna c-bet that flop 100% of the time. The only thing I should be worried about is aces, but that's one combination. Like another set is gonna bet for sure, because that ace actually helps him get value. I shouldn't say for sure, because nothing's for sure, but for very likely. Alright, so we flop top, and we just bet 1/3 of the pot, because this board is really dry. I would do this with basically a very large part of my range. So I do also have to do it with these hands. He calls, and we're gonna size up a little. See if he wants to call. Let's see if he has like king queen or king jack or king 10 maybe. I would expect him to check raise stuff like 2-pair on the flop. So this guy's really loose, so we're gonna start sizing up on this We're gonna start sizing up on this table. Talking's hard sometimes. Should have done that a long time before on this one. Just until his stack gets significantly smaller, where I don't really wanna 3x anymore. Okay, so we once again get the low flop, and I'm gonna once again bet big, and I'm gonna once again hope this guy folds and doesn't do anything like last time. But he can't do that every time. Because once again, I can have 3s, I can have 6s, I can have 7s, I can have 7-6, so I can have all the nutty hands he can have. There goes the recreational, and there goes the other guy. And I kind of like betting big there, because this guy is going to call with whatever reasonable hand he could have, but I also charge the draws a lot more. So let's hope he goes for it again, because this time I can definitely 4-bet him. He doesn't squeeze a lot though, so I kind of hate the fact that he called. I'm gonna raise this one against him. I'm gonna check this back and control the pot size a little, at least for now. And here, I'm actually gonna fancy play my air. I don't think he ever has a 7, so he's really capped here. I think that works really well. I'm gonna call once for that size. Here I'm gonna fold because this guy is VB. Well, since he makes that size again, I'm gonna call again and lose. Not sure what he's thinking of. Like, I think the best hand he can possibly have here is like pocket 4s or whatever. So I'm gonna bomb it here and take it down probably. I would be really surprised if he calls. Like, it's not impossible clearly, but I would be surprised. Also not sure why he's still thinking, because if I were in his situation on the turn, I would think about what's gonna happen on the river. Like, me bombing it again is definitely like in the realm of possibilities. So why would he not already think about that river? Like, why does he still need to think about it? He should have already figured out what he's gonna do. And he folds, like I expected. Like, he caps himself by checking back the flop. So there's basically very little that he could have that can actually call there. The only thing could be that he checked back a 7 for some reason, but that's just unlikely. And even if he does, if it has a weak kicker, it's still gonna be a really, really tough call. Because my line is really strong there. Could actually be that he had ace high and was thinking about my line not making sense. But I would actually take that line with some value hands too. Not a lot, some. I also don't take that line with a bluff that often either, so I just don't take that line very often in general. So here I'm gonna bet small. He does fold a reasonable amount of c-bets, and his board is really dry, so let's just see if he wants to fold. If not, didn't risk that much. Now I'm gonna try and realize my equity by checking back. Not gonna realize anything because I have jack high. I could still win against some type of flush draw, but I'm basically always losing here. I don't think betting is gonna accomplish much because I don't think he's gonna fold anything that's better. And like I said, I can still win. I really think that's a bad, horrible call, by the way. So that's something to note. So 1/3 of the pot, he's actually calling all kinds of garbage, like complete garbage. But he folded before, so I wonder what he had that time. When I bet 1/3. I really wonder. Maybe it's just because the queen is paired that he thinks, I don't know what he thinks. No, it doesn't actually make a lot of sense to try and figure it out. Because we'll never know anyways. All we know he had that is that he had that. Here I'm gonna call one street. I also do this because I will call a lot of pocket pairs and like 9x stuff, and I need to be able to defend on some turns where there's a queen or an ace or a king or whatever. So I do need to have some high cards that call on the flop as well. This is actually my 4-bet, standard 4-bet hand, but this guy made it extremely large, so I'm just gonna fold. Usually I would 4-bet there. And he bets again, so now it's time to fold. Standard 3-bet with the king queen. This time if he 3-bets me, I'm 4-betting. Why not ace 5 suited? Well, because I'm in position and I can actually call that hand. So he checked. I'm gonna check again because this is a good bluff card for him, so I want to make sure that I give him an opportunity to bluff. And now I'm gonna pretend to think and actually just call and then check again on the river and call another bet if he makes it. Yep, let's snap it off. See, and that's why I checked, like I gave him a chance to bluff. Because that's a really good card for him to start bluffing. And if he doesn't have anything, like he's not gonna call me anyways. If he has a queen, he's definitely gonna bet. So I think that's easily the best way to make money. Nah, let's just check it down. Actually, I probably have the best hand here anyways. Ooh, that's a pretty good card. Let's bet the flop. Hope he has something for some reason. Which he does, and he calls. That's pretty lucky actually. What did he have? He had a 3, see? So that's why I bet big. I know if he has something, after we check twice, he's gonna call me anyways. Oh, I forgot to bet larger again. This is so ingrained in me, like min raise the button. And this guy makes a very standard squeeze, takes a really good squeeze spot. And I'm gonna call. And he probably calls too. He has a really weird stack size that might shove, but this isn't the kind of player that will do that, so I'm not that worried about it. I expected him to call though. And this is a 3-bet happy regular, so I don't really want to fold a hand like this. Here I'm gonna call. This one's folding on the flop. So he checks. I need to bet for value and protection, or do I? Because this could just be pot control. Yeah. How many cards are gonna be annoying? Ace or king for sure. Not that many. I'm actually just gonna check and control the pot size myself. Like a club isn't that annoying because he probably c-bets all his flush draws. And now he has to worry that I have a flush. Although he probably thinks I would bet all my flush draws, and he might be right, so I don't really have that many flushes here. But neither does he. And he's probably not sophisticated enough to realize that that neither of us has any flush draws. I don't think I can get value. Can I maybe bet really small? Like 1/10 of the pot? It's very tempting, but I'm not gonna do that because I really don't want to get raised. Then again, if he raises me, like what's he representing? He probably couldn't have a flush. So I could potentially actually call him because he's just not repping anything. Jack. That's a shame. He busts. This guy actually deserved a dark green. Really, really bad. Because he's playing 70% of the hands. Like that's worse than just bad. He seems familiar. Probably played with him earlier. But 5-10 offsuit is just not strong enough. You're gonna 3-bet me again? If you do, I gotta fold. Here I'm calling in position with a very playable hand. Here I'm c-betting my strong hand. The jack isn't optimal for me, like it's not really great, but I will still have the best hand most of the time. Okay, so he checks to me, so I think I want to start betting here, because I have a lot of equity, even if called. I would have bet a 10, clearly. I would have bet a diamond, but I don't think I'm gonna bet this complete blank. Because if he's willing to call a flop, he might call me again. Let's see if he value bets. If he doesn't, then I'm probably gonna take another stab. Because when he checks the flop and then calls, he either has an ace, like ace jack or ace king, that's just scared of the queen or something like that, or he just has a queen or worse. And if he has a queen or worse, I think he would fold if I bet on the river. Like, I would expect most players to fold in that situation. I'm not gonna open this. I normally would, but this guy. Alright, and we take down some more blinds. Let's open this queen. Get caught by the small blind. So this is a really bad flop for the small blind. The only hands that hit this are 7, 8, 7s and 8s. That's basically all he could have. So I'm gonna bet really small to try and get some value. If he check raises, that will be an issue, but he will end up folding a lot of the time. Because he just has a lot of suited connectors and like queen jack and like king jack, king queen type stuff, as well as a lot of pocket pairs that also hate the ace. So that's a flop that a small blind will often end up folding, like really often. He calls me again, so maybe he's not the best player. He also didn't reload. So here, same thing, small blind, so he probably has a hand like a suited connector or a pocket pair. And this flop is actually fairly safe for him. So I would have liked to have some more backdoor equity, so I'm actually gonna check. That's a good card for me. This time I'm gonna bet it, and then probably bet the river if it's a high card, but not if it's a blank. I don't need to bet the river, that's good. I don't want to defend sixes against a raise that large. Just not strong enough. Easy call. Really good fluff from my hand. I like betting out here just to protect my hand. The only thing that he could probably have is like a 10 or some sort of pot controlling pocket pair, but often he will just have missed that board. Although the 10 isn't a great card, that's for sure. Here I'm gonna raise because this board is really draw heavy. I do have some very nice backdoor outs. And this guy is fairly aggressive. He does call, and that's a good card for me. I can definitely represent a flush, so I'm gonna really be betting big here, because that's what I would do if I had the flush. Also, it puts a lot of pressure on him. He instantly folds, so he probably put me on a flush draw to begin with. Also, if he had a really strong hand that isn't a flush, he would have probably 3-bet the flop, so the only thing I have to be worried about is a flush. But it's far more likely he doesn't have it, because he could also 3-bet with a flush draw. Here I'm gonna check back, hope to just get the showdown. He bets again, so he checks the ace, but then bets the river. King queen could potentially do that. If he's smart enough to do that, yeah, maybe. But he could also be betting like queen 7 because he's probably not a good player. judging by his stack. I'm still gonna fold it. He could have 10-9 too, by the way. Made a So this guy likes folding to 3-bets, and my hand is reasonably good. That's not the kind of action that I would have liked, but this flop is pretty decent for me. Gonna bet small because that's what I would do with aces too. He raises me and I'm gonna call because I have a lot of backdoor outs as well as a pair. That's one of my backdoors. I'm probably check raising all in if he bets. Yep, that's what I'm gonna do. And he insta calls, and I have a lot of outs even against kings. Because I actually had 40% against kings. But unfortunately we don't get there. I don't mind his call pre-flop. Like, you'll see this more and more. That's also why, like, I don't really want to stack off kings anymore in early position as well as queens. Like, basically I don't stack off anything anymore pre-flop in early position and middle position, because my opponents are just not stacking off with kings anymore. So if they're not stacking off kings, they're only stacking off aces, which means that anything you stack off just runs into aces. That doesn't mean that re-raising isn't good, because you still have fold equity and such, but I think it's it's a higher EV play to just call. His bet size was a bit peculiar, by the way. Like, I wouldn't take that sizing with kings, because he's basically saying, look, I'm committed. So he's only gonna get called or basically shoved on by hands like these, which have a lot of equity, or hands that actually beat kings. So I think betting smaller is way better, because then you invite worse hands, and you could actually get shoved on by worse hands and such that think they have fold equity. Like, I didn't think I had much fold equity anymore because of his bet size. Like, he's getting like 5-1, so he's not folding much. So I really don't like his sizing. I think it's more like I'm scared and I wanna just get the money in now without making a mistake. I think that's basically what he was doing, and that's not optimal for sure. If he bets, I call because I have my spades and I have a pair that could still be good. Here I'm gonna call too. He checks and he has a jack. Good for you. After the flop gets checked through, I'm actually gonna bet this, protect my hand as well as bet for value. And here I'm folding. Wow, they both call. That's kind of unexpected. Like, if you're both able to call, why isn't one of you betting the flop? And that's a really horrible card. He bets really small, instantly small, and he calls, so I don't think I can win. There we go. I would have bet the flop if I were him. And I'm not sure if he should be calling the turn. Yeah, I guess he should. But I would have bet the flop. And I like my fault, because I'm just not beating anything anymore. Especially if he calls too. Like, there's no way I can beat both of them with third pair. Alright, it's time to finish the session. Let me just play out to the blinds and then call it a day. There's been some interesting spots. I misplayed one or two hands, but that's bound to happen at some point. Overall, I'm fairly happy with my play. How did that pot stay so small with aces versus set? Raise? Okay, so far so good. Wait, what happened? Did he check? Yeah, okay. So this guy actually does check overpairs. On this board though I wouldn't, because it's so dry, like you're gonna be able to make him fold a lot, and you have to like be sort of balanced anyways. So I would be betting a lot of my hands in this case, again because an under the gun range is pretty strong and this flop just doesn't hit anyone. So he checks and calls. It's a 3. So he checks and calls again, but if I were him I would definitely value bet again. Like, how does he end up having a 4 in this case? I just don't see that. I would have bet like 1/3 pot with my set on the river. And then the aces almost certainly call. Alright, that was number 3, and it seems like this is the last hand on this table too. So that's gonna be it for now. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed it, and see you next time.